Hi, my name is James Curley and my project name is Metal of Éire. So it's a web application that contains metal music event listings in Ireland, metal music related news, Irish metal podcasts with an MP3 modal to listen to each episode, and an important feature is the ability to check for updated content using this button here. How does it work? Data is collected using Python's beautiful Sofware web scraping library. Scripts are ran asynchronously. I'm using the parent stack architecture, so Postgres SQL database system, Express.js for my communications between backend and frontend, React.js for frontend, and Node.js for backend. This is an architecture diagram of the delivery pipeline I created for the application. So my code changes are made locally, pushed to GitHub. Once my GitHub branch is merged to master, Circle CI webhook will trigger a Circle CI pipeline that contains two stages. First stage is to build a staging environment on an AWS EC2 Linux server. So it uses the Linux rsync command to synchronize my files from the master branch to the Linux server, and then we SSH into the server and run a Docker compose to spin up a Express container and a React container. The pipeline then goes on hold. The user needs to log into Circle CI and manually approve the job after performing user acceptance tests on the staging environment, because the staging environment is essentially an exact replica of a production environment. So once the user is happy, they can approve the next stage of the pipeline and build the production environment. So we synchronize the files from master GitHub branch to the app directory on the server, and then run the Docker compose to spin up the containers again. This is a flowchart that describes the check for updates. So when the user clicks on check for updates on the UI, they use a Jenkins API to trigger a remote build, passing in a parameter. The parameter is a React prop set to the value of the name of the component that check for updates is being called from. So we make the API call, the build starts, we check the response header of the build, the API response for a queue URL. Once we get the queue URL, we do a fetch, which is just a React GET request. Fetch the queue URL, check the response to get a build URL. From the build URL, then we can get a job result. So the job result will be at one of three values: null, success, or failure. While it's at null, we just poll the job result again using a set timeout callback function until the job is success or failure. So while the job is null, it's because the Jenkins job is still building. While the build is going on, this is what happens inside the Jenkins job. Jenkins checks the parameters that are passed in from the UI. It could be DME, Blabbermouth, or Metal Cell, depending on the component that called it. Checks the parameters, points to GitHub, looks for a shell script called run web scrapers. It passes in the parameter into the shell script, and the shell script uses that parameter to determine which Python web scraper script needs to be ran, just using if-else logic. Once the script runs, it connects to the URL of the web page to be scraped, collects the data into an array, transfers the data into a CSV file, and then the contents of the CSV file are used to create a table in Postgres. At that stage, the build will finish, and we get a success value, at which point we reload the calling component in React, which will display the new content and display a success snack bar at the bottom of the page like this. If the job fails for any reason, if the job is disabled on the Jenkins server, say, an error snack bar will display in red. So we have four tiles here on the homepage. DME, Blabbermouth News, and Metal Cell. All the data from those is populated with using web scraping. And the Ticketmaster page here, the data is populated using Ticketmaster's Discovery API. So all this data is pulled directly from Ticketmaster servers every time you click into it. So I created an API call that managed to filter hard rock and heavy metal events in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So I was able to get things like list of artists, dates, venues, cities, the price including the booking fee, and the status of the gigs, and links to buy tickets. And then we just have a load more button at the bottom of each page that displays 10 items at a time. The DME page. So this is using web scraping. So it's pulled from the database. I got a list of artist details and the links to buy tickets. Blabbermouth News gets a list of the news headline, the date it was published, and a link to read the article. I'm pulling about 100 of them from Blabbermouth News each time. The Metal Cell podcast. This is a podcast show done by a friend of mine down in Cork, who publishes the podcast up to Fireside FM's website in Cork every week. So from that, I'm able to pull the title of the episode, the date it was published, the duration, and then I use the React library, which I use for most of the front end work on this website. To use I use it here to make a modal that passes in the MP3 link for the podcast, so you can listen to the podcast using a HTML MP3 player element. So I'll just demonstrate now, checking for updates. So click check for updates, sends an API call to Jenkins, triggers a job which runs the web scrapers. The button disables so you can't hammer the server requests, and then we get a list of new content from today. So that's it. I'll take any questions now. Thank you.